take a piece of flesh. And so they even had it scientifically down, like 30. If you got hit 30 times, then you were dead. You're going to bleed to death. So it's like, how many? 10. Give him 10, so that he halfway dead. Anyway, she got flogged. And then her two daughters, who were like 10 and 11, got raped right in front of her and in front of the entire village. And then they left and they were like, yeah, you see, don't be saying none of that. She probably, she had a reputation of being really tall, red hair, and like really intense eyes. So she probably pissed the guy off. She probably ran up to him and was like, what are you doing? I am queen. You can't make us the slave province, It's like, I was like, whoa, a woman talking to me like that? All right, we're going to flog you. So they flogged her, raped her daughters, but they let her go. They're like, all right, we taught you, lady. But she ended up gathering together all the Iceni and the kingdom to the south, the Dodonii. And they wreaked havoc, and they almost kicked the Romans out. They were almost successful. They almost kicked Roman out. And maybe England never would have been taken over by the Romans after that, because England's a hard place to invade, because it's an island, filled with people who are already probably the cream of the crop of Europe anyway. That's another theory I have. It's the place that's the best place to live is where the best place people are going to be. The smartest people go to the Ivy League schools. You know what I mean? Smartest, like I said before, the smartest people were in Egypt, because that's the Nile, best place to go. So anyways, they may never have taken, if they had been getting kicked out dead, maybe Rome never would have taken over England, because they never were able to take over the Germans. So anyways, she stormed some towns, she stormed another town, and then she even defeated an entire Roman legion. The Roman legion was hiking through a forest, and they attacked them from either side and killed the Roman legion. So then the guy was like, oh my God, we only have 2 legions left? Or it was like 3 legions left? Yeah, they only had 3 legions left, like 15,000 guys in the entire of England. And so they had to hike down their main road called Bardingham Street or Bartolom Street, which is right through the middle of England from London all the way up to almost to the western, I guess where Edinburgh, where Liverpool is-ish. Or maybe it's south of that, about Liverpool. They ran down south really fast, and they were like, all right, well, what are we going to do? Then they sacked one town, and all the Iceni did. They went in, and the Romans run inside of the temple, because by then Rome was like a city, right? They had everything. They had the Colosseum. They had their big temple to Zeus. They went inside the temple of Zeus to get fortified, and then they burnt it down. So they killed all of them. And then they sacked London, the capital of all of Rome and England. So they had to run. They all ran away, and then they destroyed London after they had all left. And then the Romans were like, all right, what are we gonna do? So the Romans went over, and they stopped. They knew these guys were really high on themselves. They thought they were going to control them because they already sacked all these cities. They killed a legion, and they had like 100,000 warriors by now. Okay, I don't know exactly how many. I guess historians give numbers, but they're notorious for exaggerating, so you can't really take that for face value. But anyways, the Romans were like, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that they know where we are, but we're going to huddle ourselves on the end of a valley that funnels into trees, and then so that we can kind of use the trees as a place where they can't come out of as quickly, and then we're going to face them head on, because Romans fight the best when you go head on into somebody, because they could lock their shields really close to each other and make this big wall of shields, right? Where numerical advantages don't really mean that much. For example, if you've seen that movie, what's it called? Sparta, the 300 Spartans. Remember in the movie, and this is actually how it happened in real life, they had the Persians go up, and also in the naval battle, like I mentioned before, they had the Persians come up into this narrow valley. So you could have 100 million Persians behind. It doesn't matter, because they can't fight. The only thing that matters is the people in front. So if your warriors are better than those warriors, we kill you, and then we step over their dead bodies, and we kill the next ones, and just kill the next ones, and it's like numerical advantage, nothing. We just kill you, and so these Iceni, they didn't have shields. They fought butt naked, or with no shirts on. They didn't have any armor. Their weapons were probably not made out of as fine of metal, and they didn't have armor. I mean, these Romans had armor, shields, huge, plate armor around their chests, their legs, shields that they locked together. So this crazy guy yelling with an axe runs up, And he's gonna go against a bunch of shields. Was he gonna like try and hack the guy's helmet, and then he gets stabbed, and then he falls over, and then the guy gets the next guy. So numerical advantages aren't really, 15,000 against. Well, who cares? They're gonna win. And so then they came up against them head-on. So that's why I like to force head-on, and make the fighting area the smallest. And they also made a wedge formation like this, so that the guys would run in, and then they would get like jam-packed because they could use the shields to like squish them, so that they ran in like a mob. And you know how people get killed all the time in mobs and rock concerts and stuff. Same thing in a battle. They ran in, and then they got bumped up against the freaking shield. And then his friend bumps up against him, and then they're just pinned. Their arms are pinned, and they can't do anything. And then they're like, wait, hey, give us space, give us space. And the guys, they don't know anything. They're like, they're not tacticians. They're not warriors. They're freaking farmers, right? So then the guys do the wedge into him, just crush him, fucking stab him, step over the bodies, and then just stab him. And then, the Iceni finally knew what was going on, and they backed off a little bit. And then they saw all the dead people, and then they saw how the Romans were just hacking with those shields. And then they were like, and of course the Romans had been shooting javelin into their midst and killing them that way. Anyways, they retreated. And then they ran away, but they thought they were all going to win. So they brought their whole families and their whole like oxen carts to like make a big half moon around the whole battlefield. So not only were they pinned up against the Romans in the forest on one end, they were pinned up against their own ox carts and their wives and children that they brought to watch the great victory. And they couldn't run between the ox carts that they brought tons of, because there's like 100,000 people. So they were like pinned inside, and they couldn't run away. And the Romans just came in and pushed them with their shields up between the ox carts and them, and fucking hacked and hacked and hacked. And they said that the Romans lost 400 men, but they killed 80,000 people. So that's like, 400 deaths? I killed 400 people on average. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but people there's been some battles like this, like when the Romans lost to the Visigoths and stuff, like at the end of the battle, like there's rivers of blood. Like you can see rivers of flowing water, red water, it's blood, flowing blood, rivers of blood. And you'd like fall down because the grass was soaked like a sweat sponge of just blood. You'd fall, and smell of blood, death and dead bodies everywhere, and heaps of bodies walking over them, and must have been just crazy. So anyways, they never found her body. They thought maybe she killed herself or whatever. So of course that brought rise to a lot of different myths of what happened to Boudica. But anyways, yeah, she was on a chariot and stuff. See, that's how the Romans could take over, because these other guys, they just weren't good fighters. They were just like, that's how the Vikings fought. You'll do great one-on-one like that, tribe against tribe, but not if you're up against a freaking 15,000 Roman soldiers who can hike like 50 miles a day with 60 pounds of freaking weight in sandals. Badasses, professional soldiers. The Romans were the first people to have professional soldiers, I think, under Julius Caesar, where they actually pay them a certain amount of money per week, per month. And after 30 years, they're given land either on one of the places they conquer or even back in Italy somewhere. And then, you can retire and live that way. So, yeah. So anyways, that was under Nero. Now, Claudius, he took over England. He was a good emperor, but he died because See, this is where Rome was getting... This was a really crazy period of Rome, because Caligula was killing everybody. He was just a freaking gangster killing everybody. Now, Claudius, he married this woman called Agrippina, who was the sister of Caligula, the crazy guy. And now she was probably a lot younger than Claudius. Now, Claudius was like a good emperor, but he was kind of a pushover. Like, he was easily manipulated by women. And so he at least by women, maybe by men too, but he was easily manipulated by women, especially Agrippina, his new wife. And so she was like, oh, Claudius, you need to make my son emperor instead of your own biological son from your other marriage. Make my son emperor from my marriage, from my previous marriage. who was Nero. So he was like, oh, okay. 4 years later, she poisoned him with a mushroom so that she could become, because she figured she was, all she cared about was power, just like it was in her blood, right? She figured she'd be more powerful as the wife of an emperor as the mother of an emperor than the wife of one. At least they say that's what she did. She poisoned him with a mushroom because he died suddenly. Poisoned by a mushroom. So now Nero is the emperor. But Nero comes from a pretty like fucked up family. His uncle was like a murdering psychopath. His mother murdered her husband. And then, of course, their whole family before Caligula had been murdered and all that stuff. So this guy was crazy. Nero, I think, was more interesting because there's more details about him. I think he's crazier than Caligula. I think Nero is the craziest person who ever lived. He has the most interesting life because this guy, he was in power for 14 years, from 54 to 68. So I guess he wasn't totally crazy the whole time. I mean, Caligula only lasted 2 years. So obviously Caligula was crazier, but I mean, Caligula was really crazy. He tried to take over England also, but he wasn't, even though his dad was a military commander, he was just some spoiled brat who grew up in an island with fucking Tiberius, who he hated, and he was just a psychopath. So, and they think he was insane. Caligula killed all of these. I think he did a reign of terror. Like he killed like all of the people, of like the senators, so that if you were a senator, you basically thought you were going to get killed by Caligula. And he like joked one day, I'm going to make my horse a senator because he's smarter than all the other senators. Here, you're a senator now, haha. You know, and he went and he tried to take over England. But he got to England and he looked at the waves and he goes, oh man, it looks like it's going to be hard to cross the straits. I know what we'll do. Collect all the shells. So he got all of his legionaries to collect all the shells and fill up bags of the shells. He's like, okay, let's march on Rome and tell them that we conquered England and this is our booty. And they were like, what? Yeah, so they thought he was insane. Anyways, Nero is just as crazy. Actually, I think I could tell crazier stories about Nero than Caligula. Nero became to power at like the age of like 21. Now, he was totally crazy. What he did was, he's actually the Antichrist. Nero is the Antichrist. The number 666. Number 666 is his name in Greece, because Greek alphabet, they didn't have Arabic numerals, and the Romans, they had the Roman numerals, right? The Greeks didn't have the Arabic numerals, so a letter in the Greek alphabet also represented a number. So if you were to add all of the numbers up in Nero's name in Latin and spelled in Greek, it would add up to the number of 666. And that's why they called him. That's why that's the number of the devil. And that's the number of him. Because Nero lived, 64 to 68 AD, which was the same exact time that the New Testament was being written, I think, in Rome, in Latin, or at least inside the Roman Empire. Right, the first New Testament was 1 year into his reign, and then the second New Testament, John, was written like 7 years after his reign or whatever. So that was when Christians were starting. Christians was actually a subgroup of the population, probably the fastest growing group of the population. They're really motivated. They're writing the Bible and all this. So and they're living at the same time of the most craziest motherfucker who ever lived in the history of mankind. Because what he did was he wanted to build a pleasure palace, and he wanted to build it right smack dab in the middle of Rome because he wanted to be Mr. Big Bad Guy. He was a megalomaniac, and he had the absolute power. Because I think when he was a kid, he had to make a decision to kill some like guy who was going to be a tyrant. So he was told that he was God and he could do everything he wanted. So he kind of ordered him, and he got excited about that. I mean, Caligula was like that too, or maybe it was Nero, but one of those guys, I think it was Caligula, would like throw live cats and dogs off of towers and then watch them splatter and die just for fun. He just like loved killing people, and Nero is the same way. So anyways, Nero, what he did is he burned down Rome. There was this huge fire in Rome in like the year 69 AD or something like that. He burned down all of Rome. And they think that it was him who burned it down because they saw him standing on top of a tower playing a lyre, singing the lyrics to The Fall of Troy. And he was looking at it like it was this beautiful spectacle and just like singing a song. And as soon as the fire was finally put out and costing billions of sesterces, he annexed all of the land. And that's where all the richest people, it was like the middle of Manhattan. He annexed all of it, which is acres and acres and acres, to his. And he made all the rich people and the senators move off to the other side of town. And he used all the taxes, and he increased taxes, ending up causing a big revolution in Jerusalem, where they had to actually sack Jerusalem in the year 75 because of the taxes of Nero, because he needed to spend all this extra money to build his own pleasure palace, which was huge. He made a giant lake that he diverted the canals to fill up this giant lake right on where the current Colosseum is. Made this giant lake and this giant palace with like 168 rooms. It was like Versailles, only even more magnificent because the ceilings were decked out in rubies and blue, all of these different kinds of gems to try to make it look like the heavens, and all over the walls. And the term grotesque comes from him because he would have people paint like nude mermaids and like serpents and dragons and all kinds of like big titted ladies and prostitutes and all stuff all over the walls, because he was like really into sex. And I think just like he's the blood of Caligula. He would have his friends screw his wives and stuff. And he had a wife, and then he married another wife, and the other wife wanted, for like the wedding present, she wanted his ex-wife head on a platter. So he's like, all right, yeah. He gives her his ex-wife's head on a platter to his new wife who wanted it. And then he like would give these. He thought he was a great poet, singer, artist, and so he wanted. He gave these big shows, performances as a singer, and he forced all of the like senators to watch, and you weren't allowed to leave, and you weren't allowed to fall asleep. I mean, this is how much power these people had. And one guy was caught falling asleep in one of his performances, which I heard were like really bad. He banished the guy from Rome for eternity, made him go to like Jerusalem because of that. And his son actually ended up becoming a future emperor of Rome, I think. But anyway, he gave one performance where he held like a staff, like, the scepter, the sign of imperial. Only he dropped it, and then he picked it up, and he was like, yes, and then he did it. And his wife was like kissing his afterwards. And she's like, yes, you did great. You were magnificent. You were wonderful. I mean, even when you dropped the scepter, nobody... And he was like, wait, what? You mentioned that I dropped the scepter? What? No, but I mean... And he's like, what? You don't... They don't like me, do they? And then so he whacked her across the head, and she's like, what? No, don't hit me. And he's like, fuck you. And he beat her to death. And she was pregnant. So he became like paranoid after that, and he was like, I guess was haunted by her ghost. He thought his ghost was after him. So he went nuts. And he, anyways, by then he had really pissed off. He'd only lived in his pleasure palace for 5 months. And after he was finally built, he goes, finally, I have a house fit for a human being. But anyways, he only lived there for a few months, and then he was deposed because he finally pissed off all these people, probably because they're all terrified of him and they thought they were going to die. And it was like a survival thing, because I think he was just killing people. But he was crazy because I think they actually finally deposed him because he was going to plan an invasion of Germany, or like there was like a rebellion in like northern France also because of the high taxes he'd been imposing. He was going to plan an invasion. Oh shit, I only have 2 minutes. Maybe I can do this by then. He was going to plan an invasion of northern France by bringing his army was going to be 100,000 naked prostitutes. And he was going to perform his wonderful performance And he was going to cry in front of all of the rebellers and say, "Oh, look what you're doing to your great emperor. You're making your great emperor so sad by rebelling." and they were going to dance, and his women were going to dance the whirling dervish, and he was going to play the flute, and they were all going to be like so amazed by the magnificence of their emperor that they were just going to like obey him and not rebel anymore. So that's the army he was going to plan. And so they're like, all right, let's depose him. So they deposed him, and he committed suicide with the help of his friend. He stabbed himself, kind of like what the Japanese do, Harikari. And he said, "What an artist dies in me," as he died. And then they replaced him by somebody else. Although, I think I'm out of time. So this is going to be part 1 of history, all the way up until Nero. And then the next one's going to be part 2.